Welcome back to the Context Coaching Podcast. We are joined today by Coach Nick French of Whitney High School in Rockland. He is the head basketball coach and the athletic director going into year 2. Coach, thanks for being here today.
Thank you, Coach. Appreciate it.
So, if you could help us understand your story. How did you end up in the chair that you are in now? What's your background in coaching? How'd you get into it? What was the first job, subsequent jobs, until the point where now everything flows uphill to you?
Yeah. So, I grew up in Fresno, California, and I tell people all the time that I'm probably one of the few people that's very proud of that. And grew up in Fresno and played for Coach Vance Wahlberg at Clovis West High School. And, Coach Wahlberg is pretty renowned around this area, state of California, high school basketball, college basketball. Played for him, graduated in 96, and then went on to play for Steve Cleveland at Fresno City College, who he was actually my best friend growing up. It's his father. So played 1 year at City with a really good team. And then went on to play 3 years at Fresno Pacific University there and had a pretty good career. When I ended up playing, or I finished playing, like a lot of people at Fresno Pacific, a lot of guys that I played with, they all kind of went into the teaching world and in that realm of being a teacher, kind of being a coach. I didn't think I'd ever be a coach, honestly. It was funny. I was one of the 2 people on our campus that graduated with like a law degree. So I always saw myself going into law school. And the funny thing is one of my best friends, my son's godfather, who was one of my teammates at Fresno Pacific, he was actually the other guy that had the law degree. And now he's a big time lawyer and makes tons of money. And I'm sitting in this chair as an AD and a coach. But so it's funny. But I started teaching. And so having those connections at Fresno Pacific really got me into I knew I just needed a job. I wanted a paycheck. And so the funny thing is a really good friend of mine, Todd Tompkins, who was a coach and a player at Fresno Pacific, he got me in contact with some people at the county office in Fresno. And the only job you can get at that time without a teaching credential was they're going to put you in it was a severe special education classroom out in Reedley. If anybody knows what Reedley is, it's about half hour, 45 minutes in Sticks out in the valley. And so I remember the first day of going to that job, sitting in the parking lot going, what in the hell am I doing? But this is not college basketball. This is not I was just playing like a couple months ago, but got into teaching, and I actually started really loving to teach special ed. And it was a path that I'd go down in my teaching career for the next 17 years. But I knew I always wanted to coach in a sense. When I started teaching, I remember going back, and I think my first ever head coaching job was I was the head JV boys volleyball coach at Clovis West, and did that for a year. And then, being from that area and being from Fresno, I was around so many amazing players and so many amazing coaches or players that kind of went on to be coaches themselves. The Vance Wahlberg tree is pretty vast, and so. Tony Amundsen and Tim Amundsen are big time coaches in that area. Tim and Tony really have been mentors for me growing up as a young coach. And I started coaching with Tony. I coached with Tony for 1 year at Central High School when he was head coach at Central. And I coached the freshman team and also kind of help him on varsity when I could. But and Tim was a coach at Clovis West at the time. And so those guys really were kind of those role models and mentors for me. Like I looked at those guys and said, okay, I know I want to be what those guys do. The influence they had, and even with Coach Wahlberg taught me more than anybody else probably on this planet when it comes to being an athlete and being a coach or being a player in that sense. So coach at Central, and then met my soon-to-be wife. She was going to Fresno State at the time, and she was from the Bay Area, and she had an unexpected kind of family issue where she had to move back to the Bay Area. And I was like, well, I really, really like you, so I guess I'm going to go with you. And I never left Fresno. I was one of those people I had never left. I got a huge family in Fresno, like just too many people in Fresno. But I finally said, you know what, I got to get out of here. So I moved to the Bay Area, moved to the East Bay, moved to Hayward actually, and I got a job teaching at Logan High School, which if anybody knows Logan is like a small junior college campus. It's the biggest high school I'd ever seen, like 5,000 kids, and taught special ed there. But the basketball coach at the time was not a fan of like bringing anybody in and kind of an outsider. And so Coach Wahlberg, who had came from that same area, he kind of got me in contact with Craig Ashmore, who was the coach at Newark Memorial. And anybody knows Coach Ashmore, he's one of the best high school coaches ever, one of the best coaches I've ever been around. And so I went over there and I was the freshman coach for Coach Ashmore, and I also helped him on varsity. And I tell people all the time, I probably learned more in those 2 years on how to be a head coach from Coach Ashmore and being at Newark than anywhere else. Because he had that program was rolling. He had some big time players coming through there, and he was just so different than a lot of the things that I had learned in the Valley. The one thing about being in Fresno is you really get stuck kind of learning, one system or one way to play. And it's no knock on that system because I do it now, but it's one of those things where it's great to get out and try to learn new things and branch out and kind of be taught the game other ways. And so probably the best experience I could have, other than, again, being with my wife and ended up marrying her, but being at Newark was amazing. And then when we were at Newark, I was only there for 2 years. And so that second year, a new school had opened up back in the Valley, Liberty Madera Ranchos, which is a very small school out in Madera Ranchos. The principal that was at the school at the time, the Alvarado family, I don't know if you know them, but their Alvarado family are a huge basketball family in the Valley. Like everything in the Valley, everybody knows everybody. And so Coach Alvarado, who was the principal at that place at Liberty, he reached out to Coach Wahlberg and said, hey, do you know anybody? I need a coach. And he goes, well, I know a young guy that's kind of getting into it that would love. And they kind of connected at us and went over there, interviewed for that job. I think we were a D4 school, very small school, interviewed, got it. So I had to go break the news to my wife that we were moving back to the Valley. So that was not the greatest thing in the world because we loved living in the Bay Area. We loved everything about it, and but I wanted to be a head coach, and so head varsity coach. So moved back to Fresno, coached at Liberty for 3 years, taught special ed for 3 years at Liberty. Loved the people there. They're awesome. Really small school. Did what we could. And then after my third year, a really, renowned school in Fresno, very rich in tradition when it comes to sports, Hoover High School. Their job opened up and I applied for that job and got the varsity job at Hoover. And I had 5 great years at Hoover. I loved every minute of that place. I loved the kids there, loved the teachers, loved my coaches. Thought we did a pretty good job with the program. But I always, again, when you're in the Valley, it's one of those things where, the most coveted jobs, like you talked about, are always in Clovis Unified. And me being a Clovis West kid and Coach Wahlberg, I don't think was back yet. He was doing his thing in the NBA and doing all that kind of stuff. So of course there was always that dream of becoming the coach at Clovis West or getting any job in Clovis Unified. And there was a couple times where the funny thing is there's a couple jobs that would open up, and now I'm back at it, kind of applying for those jobs and losing out to those jobs to my mentors. I'd lose out to every job to Tim or Tony Edmondson. And so it's one of those things where you'd be in the final 2 for those jobs. And that was the most, those were what I really wanted. So it just got to the point where it was very frustrating and not anything against those guys because I'd probably hire them over me also. Correct. But at the time,
absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, even today, those guys, I had to play 10 this last year in the playoffs and they beat me. I hate them. So it's one of those things where it was just frustrating. And so, but it was kind of like a silver lining. That same year, I had brought my team. I brought Hoover. I was so tired of going to all these tournaments in LA forever, right? When you live in Fresno, the only place you go play good basketball really is you have to go to Los Angeles. And I was just so tired of the drive. I was so tired of doing that. And I always thought, you know what, I want to bring my kids to somewhere new. Just go somewhere new. And it's funny, my cousin is stationed at Beale Air Force Base, which is right up here. And so I said, hey, do you know anything? I just kind of talking. Well, there's a high school called Whitney that has a tournament. Kind of worked out with our schedule. So I brought our Hoover team up here to Whitney, and we played in a tournament. And I was looking around, and I'm like, man, facilities were amazing. The school colors were maroon and like just like Clovis West. And I'm looking around going, this is kind of neat. This is cool. You know, you had 2 huge gyms, brand newer school. And then I watched their team play, and I'm like, God, they could be so much better than they are, kind of a thing. And our Hoover team actually, I think we lost in the championship game of that tournament, but the AD at the time had saw me coach, saw how our team played. And so when the Whitney job opened up, he right away went down and reached out to me. He actually came to Fresno and had a meeting with me and really just kind of said, hey, do you want to come up and check out Rockland? And the only other time I had been to Rockland was honestly for that tournament. So I didn't even know anything. So long story short, I mean, came up here, fell in love with the area. More than anything, fell in love with the school. And I saw it as an opportunity for me to really create my own program on my own. You know, to kind of branch out away from the Valley, branch out away from everything, all the people that I've known, and really do my own thing. And 9 years later, you know, still here. And now, as of last year, took on this athletic director job as well. So we're busy.
Woo! We got a lot. We got a lot to
Sorry.
go after here, and we've got we don't have a committed end stop time here, but with appreciation for the audience and the attention span, I'm going to try to pack a lot into this hour. What I would like to try to parse out, if we can, is when you got that job at Liberty, you had worked for some very smart people. You had played for some very smart people. You had been mentored by some very successful people, but now you're the head coach for the first time. And I know at this point, if my math is correct, 12 plus 7 is 19 years ago. No, that's not right. 12 plus 3, 15 years ago. Maybe tough to remember, but if there is something that pops in, what did you realize right away that you still needed to figure out? Even though you'd been prepped, even though you'd watched Coach Ashmore, even though you'd played for these guys and you played for Vance, right? So it's like I know how to do this. What hit you in the side of the head and it was like, I'm in over my head? What are the things that you still needed to figure out?
You know what? I need to figure out myself. I need to figure out who I was as a coach. You know, again, like you said, I'd played for the man. I'd learned from some of the best people in the world, played with them, coached with them. Coach Ashmore, just again, the man. But every school is different and every place is different. And you know, a D4 school is very different than Clovis West or Newark Memorial. You're dealing with kids that have had no basketball success their entire life. I think when I took over at Liberty, the team won 2 games in 2 years before that. When I took over at Hoover, the team had not had a great season before that. When I took over at Whitney, the team had won 4 games before I got here. I think for me, I think one of my best qualities is I love building things. I love building programs. I think if there's one thing that I learned, not one thing, if this is probably one of the most important things from those guys, is it's a process. Like building programs is a process. And for me, and being a young coach, like anything, you want everything right away. Like you want the players right away. You want to win right away. You want them to pick up everything you're teaching them right away. And it doesn't work like that. You know, a lot of people forget that, like, you know, Coach Wahlberg coached at 2 different high schools before he got to Clovis West. Mm-hmm. You know, a lot of these great coaches that we've had or we've seen, they've had a process in this. I think that's lost in a lot of coaches today, a lot of young kids today. where it's that instant gratification kind of a thing. But when you're competitive, right? That's when you're competitive and you're driven, it's very hard to understand that there's a process in all of it, and it's going to take time, and it's going to take a ton of hard work. And really, I think too, it's just one of those things where you've got to, for me, I've always loved finding those kids that are just maybe not the greatest skilled players, but those kids that just they need somebody to trust them and believe in them. And those kids will go through a wall for you, And so I think I've done that at every school I've been at. But as a young coach, I think that's the biggest thing. Like, just take a breath, bro. Like, relax. It's gonna, again, because it's when you're passionate and you want to do good, it's hard. It's hard to be patient.
Yeah. And you know what? Your answer really funnels into what I'm after, especially the part about, hey, I had to figure out who I was, had to figure out what school I was at, what the culture was, what the identity was, and how I fit into that. But one of my strengths is building. And you took over 3 programs that were struggling and you built them each into successful, however you want to define the word success, be it wins or be it graduating players, whatever that is. Your track record bleeds success. At each concurrent stop, if you think about all 3 of those places holistically, and you are going to give a list because you are now the AD and you're going to hire a coach and you're going to say, these are the things that have to be urgent. These are important, but these are urgent. When you are building, what's the checklist, coach? What are the things at the top of the list? 1, 2, 3 that allow you to build and put process in place that is going to give you that long-term improvement if you're patient enough to let it come to you?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great question, because again, I think as a young coach, you really don't understand that. And you really have to, go through some ups and downs to really be able to answer that question. I mean, looking back at it now, I think the one thing that I think is the number one on the checklist is I think kids need to trust you. I think kids need to understand that that you're there for them more than just a basketball player. You're there for their everyday things that they're going through. And I like to tell people all the time, it's like, if it was just about basketball, then I mean, I wouldn't be in high school still. I would have tried to go and be a college coach and do all that kind of stuff. But I love the process of getting kids to understand that, look, they're only going to buy in if they trust who you are and they trust that you care about them. At the end of the day, no matter what school you go to. Now, if I go to a school and I got dudes, right, that can just play, it's easier to roll the ball out and I look great and all that kind of stuff. But, when you go to a place like Liberty Madera Ranchos, where kids really, basketball was not they're not in their school's culture. It wasn't anything that was a big deal. But if you can get kids to believe in themselves, you get kids to trust. Now it's like now you can go through the non-negotiables that I have as a coach, right? It's one of those things where when coaches ask me all the time, well, your teams play so hard. Your teams play so hard. Okay, well, there's a reason why they play hard. They're not going to play hard if they don't trust me. They're not going to play hard if they don't understand that I'm going to be there for them when they need me, right? If you can get a kid to trust you and believe who you are and you're going to be there for them all the time, like I said, they're going to play hard, right? Because they understand if that's the first non-negotiable in our program is you're going to play harder than everybody else. A lot of kids nowadays want to know why. Why am I playing hard? What does it mean? And so I think with that, it's really just, those relationships that you can build with kids, the trust, and just that, I love seeing kids. Again, I ask my coaches all the time, if I'm going to hire a coach, what are you doing this for? Right. And for me, it's always to see that aha moment in the kid. That kid gets it. He finally understands it and he knows that he can go and do it. He can really do it. And that's one thing that Coach Wahlberg, honestly, when people talk, what did he teach me? He taught me that I could push my body further than I ever could. That I could, my body and my mind, and as a player, were capable of doing so many crazy things that you never thought, because he pushed you so hard. And so, that's right. What I try to get to is really just that trust, that factor of things from kids.
I got to pick where I want to go here because it could take us down two vastly different rabbit holes. So
Sorry,
I'm going to
answer
ask.
your question.
No, you did, and it's great. The whole point when I developed this show, 100 plus episodes ago, was to create a digital database of mentorship. Right, your tree, Coach Wahlberg's tree that you're connected with, right, Coach Ashmore. You have mentors. You pick up the phone and be, hey man, I'm struggling with this. What can I do? Some of our young coaches don't have that. And when you hire a young coach and you ask them, what are you doing this for? And you're their only source of information, at some point we become Charlie Brown as the AD, right? And so it's like, how can we create this database of mentorship where they can listen to different people go through whatever struggles they are? And that was the point of this. And so if I could get you to give a short primer, bullet list if you can. What are the non-negotiables? You listed, you're going to play harder than everybody else. What's 2? What's 3? Right? It's usually a short list, but then the trickier question, which I think is the important question, is what does it mean to play harder than everybody else? And how are you measuring that as a standard so that you can hold your athletes accountable, right? So 2-part question. Yeah. What are the Whitney non-negotiables? Actually, Coach French, as you've grown, as now you're the athletic director, what are the non-negotiables of Whitney Athletics? And then here's how we measure this one, which is kind of subjective.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's going to be hilarious too, because again, I learned this day one, my freshman year in high school. And I think that they've stayed with me as a coach, and I'm sure millions of coaches out there kind of follow the same thing, because it came from Dean Smith and it went to Coach Wahlberg, and Coach Wahlberg gave it to us. And every single game, he put on the board: play hard, play smart, stay together. And for me as a player, that was, again, it's like, oh, coaches, that's the first thing coach is going to put on the board. And the funny thing is, that's the first thing I put on the board every single game. And it's probably the first thing that I put on the board for when I coach to, or when I talk to prospective coaches or other things. And as we're getting ready to start the school year, I'm trying to think about how can I take my athletic program to a new level, and teach them new things. And I keep going back to playing hard, playing smart, staying together. And if there's one thing I added, and I probably picked this up from somebody else, but I put on have fun at the end, right? Because at the end of the day, if we're not doing this and we're not having any fun, then what are we doing, right? It's not smart. So really for me, playing hard, like you said, it's like, okay, how do you play hard, right? I mean, and again,
not just how, but what does that mean?
Yeah, because well, back in the day, if you think about it,
you need to play harder. What? Yes. What does that mean, coach?
Well, that was the thing, is like in the back in the day, your coach would tell you that, play hard, and you're in your mind, you're like, well, I gotta run fast, or I don't know what what I'm saying. So again, but it's even worse now, because kids nowadays, they've got to be told like the whole reason why they're doing it. And so for us, playing hard is, again, those extra effort plays, the diving for loose balls, the taking the charges. We're going to play a brand of basketball where, when I say play hard, you should not, as a top-notch athlete, you should not be able to play for longer than 1.5 minutes, 2 minutes without just being dead tired. Right. And that's, again, a lot of people don't like that. But just the style that we play, we have to beat people, because again, I've never coached teams. I've never had a Division I basketball player. I've never had a Division II basketball player. I've never coached. The highest level of basketball that I've sent my players to is NAIA. And it's a very good level, but it's just like, I've never had a D1 stud to where I could say, hey, look, you're going to play the whole game. We're going to throw the ball to you. You're going to go score 30. I've never had that.
Right.
I've had a bunch of kids that I have to sell them really on the fact that, like, if we've got to play, you've got to play so hard to where you're getting loose balls, taking charges, playing full court defense. You're pressing all game. Offensively, we're getting a shot up in the first 10 seconds if we can. All those types of things. And also, too, we're going to play with numbers. We can't beat people with 5 guys. If we go 5-on-5, we're going to get killed. Okay, but you know what? If I can play 10 of you, if I can play 11 of you, even 12 of you, to where you're playing that way all the time, we have a chance. We can break people down. And that's kind of how it's always been in my philosophy. So when I say play hard, that's what I mean. I mean, it's like, okay, you got to do these little things. And that was one, Coach Wahlberg was huge on that. Every one of the coaches, the little things in basketball, little things in what you can teach kids that are just they're going to change the game. Playing hard, play smart, playing smart. Don't turn over the ball. Right? Can you play that hard the whole game without making silly turnovers? Can you play that way the whole game without fouling? Can you play that game or that way the whole game? Just doing those things that you, as a basketball coach, that need to happen, right? Like, the big thing nowadays, can you make an extra pass to a guy that's got a better shot than you?
Right.
Can you celebrate those types of things by the other guy making a bucket that you had that extra pass? But that to me is kind of playing smart. And then the staying together thing is the biggest one, right? Because again, these kids that are playing basketball nowadays, they're with their high school coach for a little bit of time and they go off and they go play. It has nothing to do with staying together. It's all about you. It's all about what can I get?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I think that's probably the toughest one to do, because now you're spending more time off the court talking about what kind of teammate you are. What kind of student are you? What kind of, how are you in the classroom? Are you respectful to people? Are you respectful to your teachers? And we do more, I'd say that stay together thing, we probably spend more time on that than anything else, especially after you get your program going.
Yeah.
Right. Because kids know if you're going to go to Whitney, you're going to play really hard. Right. People know it by now. If you go for Whitney, for better or worse, people always talk trash on it. You're going to play in a certain style of basketball.
Yep.
Right. But it's that stay together part that I think is my biggest, I hit on that more than anything else as a coach.
All right, let me follow that up with two things. And I want you to answer the first question, and then it's just a reminder. I want to come back to this other piece, but how has your approach changed over the years to coaching? Right. And again, like you mentioned, I grew up in Clovis. Look, we play a certain style. I still play that way today. We went to Newark. We learned X, Y, and Z.
Yep.
I'm not even really interested in the X's and O's. People that want to know what you do, they can look it up and, they can figure that piece out. But how has your approach changed as you've matured, gone from the young guy at Liberty to now you're 15 years into this thing, you're going into year 10 at Whitney itself? How has your approach changed as you coach student athletes?
I think I was thinking about this on my little small, when I dropped my son off at school today. How have I changed the most? I would say, honestly, I am way more empathetic towards kids nowadays than I ever was. Because again, the way that I was taught and the way, and it was, this is how it's done. And you do it this way all the time. And that's fine. And I thrived in that. I needed to be that. I'm still that person where just tell me what you want me to do kind of a thing. I'm way more empathetic about what's going on with my athletes outside of basketball.
Yeah.
I'm way more empathetic when it comes to, just their lives as humans. Right. And I hope that I'm trying to teach that to all of my coaches right now at Whitney. Is like, it's that whole, that whole thing where, kids aren't ATMs. You got to put stuff into them instead of just take stuff out all the time.
Yeah.
I think a lot of times coaches, back when I first started, I was trying to take more out of them than I was putting into their lives.
Yep.
And I think if there's one thing I've become, it's the reason why I became the AD, honestly.
Yep.
Is because, I love the fact that I was able to kind of create some great relationships with kids that I've had in my basketball program. But now I'm able to also go talk to that soccer player, or go talk to that girls tennis player that may be going through something, or that girls softball player that had to go through stuff.
Yeah. That's
what I love about the job.
Yeah.
But I think that's where I've changed the most. Am I still very passionate about the game? Yes. Am I still very fiery? A lot of people I tell all the time, if they come watch the game and I coach, they probably think I'm a crazy person. But then if they come hang out with me, or they come to class within my class with me, the 95% of the time, I'm the biggest teddy bear you're ever going to meet. And so I think creating those relationships with kids is by far, and that empathetic is where I've changed the most.
Yeah, absolutely. And to clarify, another way of saying what you said about the ATMs, I heard 2 summers ago, maybe 3 summers ago, it described as if you think about all relationships, not just coaching, our relationship, right? My relationship with my wife, with my children, they're all like bank accounts. And you need to have a positive balance to take a withdrawal. And to have that, you need to make more deposits than you make withdrawals, or else you're in default. And if people can think about it that way, and I thought it was like, whoa, light bulb, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, how are we navigating this world where we are giving more of ourselves than we're taking? And I think that's the nature of teaching in general, of coaching in general, and now athletic administrating in general, which leads me to that second question that I wanted to know is, now I slide into this athletic director chair, and I've got to take this culture of success that I've created with the basketball team, and I have to present it in a way to the other coaches where it's attractive to them versus dictated, so that they are as passionate about creating that change as you are. And I'm curious, same question, when you sat down in that chair, what did you realize right away that you needed to figure out? Like, oh boy, help.
Well, for me, it started in an interview, because I mean, I'm not going to lie, like I've interviewed for, 5 or 6, 7 or 7, 8 head basketball jobs. I've interviewed at Clovis North, Central, Buchanan, all these huge high schools. Never once was I nervous. Never once did I shy away from a question, because I went into those interviews as like, this is a game and I'm going to go win the game. I'm going to be competitive. That's why I was taught. I'm going to be that guy. When I interviewed for the AD job here at Whitney, I wasn't sitting in front of like just the principal and maybe another coach. I was sitting in front of all of my peers. Mm-hmm. Every head coach from every team was in the interview. And that was the hardest thing in the world for me, because a lot of those guys and girls are really good friends of mine. Mm-hmm. Like off the playing, when we hang out, our families hang out. So you really had, it made me, I had to show them who I really was as a person, not a coach. Mm-hmm. You gotta show them what your intentions are as a person. What you, again, go back to being empathetic, going back to, I might have done things with a basketball program that I think work, but you know what? They might not work for girls soccer. And I don't know girls soccer, and I'm not going to sit here and say that I know it. So I'm going to go to you as the coach and say, listen, teach me, and have that, and be empathetic to even what that coach is kind of going through. Right. And then also too, I think there's a lot of things and lessons that I can teach you guys or help you out with, especially the younger coaches. Right. Because again, there's something that I think people are missing nowadays where, I've had to work 2 other varsity jobs before I got this one. Mm-hmm. This is not where I graduated from college, spent 1 year as a freshman assistant coach, and then I asked for a varsity head coaching job. Mm-hmm. Like in my mind, I've got the greatest high school job in the world, at one of the best high schools in the state of California. So I take that very seriously. Mm-hmm. And I think, getting the younger coaches and getting even the coaches that have been here for a while to understand, like, this is a great place that we work at. We could make it way better, but it really has nothing to do with maybe our specific sport. It has everything to do with how we treat kids. How are we treating kids? How are we getting the best out of our kids? I go back to that whole thing. Do our kids, they love to play for us? Do they go home and tell their parents, I mean, I love my coach? Are they confident? Are they confident in the classroom? Because as a coach, you've given them so much support and so much love that they know they can go and do stuff. Mm-hmm. Are they confident where they know if they fail, that you're not just going to freaking come down on them and be hard on them, but you're going to be empathetic and try to help them out and teach them. Right? Like, kids these last couple of years in general have gone through so much. Mm-hmm. We've all gone through so much, but at the end of the day, the kids have had it the worst. Mm-hmm. They've had it terrible. I mean, how would you go, like, you had to do this, I had to do this. We had a whole season where some kids got no games, and I had a whole senior class get like 10 games. I couldn't even imagine of doing that my senior year. Like, my life would have been over, right? Because of how important it was to us. And so we sit there, I think we lose sight of that. And for me, it's more or less like if I can get my staff to understand like me, the person.
Mhm.
Don't look at the guy that's coaching the basketball game. Come hang out with me. Let's talk. And really just try to give a little bit of myself in that way to them. And you know this as an AD yourself. These coaches need to know that you have their back. They need to know that you're there for them. They need to know that you're gonna help them through things. You're gonna have to deal with that parent that maybe they're struggling with. You're gonna have to help them through certain situations. And I think more than anything, that's what I try to like relay to the coaches.
Yep.
Is that one, I don't know your specific sport like you do. I'm not gonna believe to say that I do. But at the end of the day, I hope we're doing what's best for kids.
Yeah. Well, and that's something that I think we've tried to message here over the years is athletics is a vehicle to teach leadership, followership, and to learn to be part of something bigger than yourselves. Number one.
Exactly.
And number two, how do we keep the student at the center of the equation, right? How do we make a commitment to not let adult problems get in the way of kids? And if we can keep that front of mind, then, and specifically being your true north, right? Then it's a whole lot easier to navigate whatever comes your way, which is expected or unexpected, and everybody's rowing in the same direction, right? Because I think it's really hard to argue with those things as, hey, this is where our focus needs to be. And yeah, you know what? I get that happened. At the end of the day, cool. I'm empathetic. Here's where the focus needs to be. And it sounds like that's what you're trying to instill there. I am very curious because I don't know the answer to this. And you have a undergrad degree in law, which would have taught you don't ask questions you don't know the answer to. But I'm curious, based on partially an assumption, right? At a small school like Liberty, you need all of your athletes to play everything to be competitive, to where you get to a larger school and sports specialization seems to tend to be the priority, simply because what I like to call the youth sports industrial complex has brainwashed people into thinking that if I don't do this 365 days a year, I can't even make my team, let alone compete. How do you manage, navigate, reconcile my assumed background that you're coming from with what I know to be the Sacramento basketball culture? Used to be part of it and run a lot of the tournaments where you're playing 300 days a year with your kids that really should be out doing something else. And I asked this partly selfishly, this is my soapbox. It's one of the greatest things about coming back home is I'm a seasonal coach now. Like I coach November 1 until the playoffs end, and we're done. Like, what should I do to become better, coach? Go play lacrosse. And it's been transformational for us as a small school. We had 16 kids matriculate to college athletics this year. 14 of them are multi-sport athletes. The 2 that aren't are sailors. So that's kind of different, right? But it's like, how do you reconcile that as the athletic director who, you're still a basketball coach, but no, coach, you got to make sure all these teams are pulling the same way and sharing.
Yeah. I mean, again, it goes back to your life lessons, and it goes back to, I think, again, that people say this all the time. I think like I was put in certain situations on purpose for my life. I really do believe that. Like being at Liberty Madera Ranchos, again, it was a very small school. So I depended on multi-sport athletes. I needed those football kids to come out and play basketball, and those basketball kids to go play baseball and all that stuff. Because again, when you're at small school basketball, I mean, it's not about the skill level. It's about, you got the better athletes, right? And that was the norm. As much as I think every coach, they're lying to you when they say they do not want their kids all the time, because they really want their kids all the time. But at the end of the day, if it comes down to, if I'm gonna have a better basketball team because I have better athletes that play other sports, then I'd rather have that. And again, life lessons, right? I learned the biggest lesson in my coaching career when it comes to this stuff, and I think it's followed me and it's helped me through the rest. My second year at Hoover High School, I had a kid on my team. His name was Eric Kendricks. Okay, and Eric Kendricks was a 4-sport athlete. He was the football star. He played basketball. He played baseball. And during baseball season, he ran track. Okay. And I had him for 2 years, his junior and senior year. And his senior year, he was blowing up. He's one of the best football players in the section. But he was also my starting 4-man. And he was 6'2", 200 pounds, ripped up, athletic as you know what, and we needed him, right? And I remember he was his senior year, we were playing this. I still laugh about this because it was the dumbest thing I've ever done. I remember we were playing in the Clovis Elks tournament, which is a tournament right after Christmas or before Christmas, one of those times. And Eric came to me and said, "Coach, I'm going to miss the game on Friday and Saturday, games on Friday and Saturday because I got to go on I got a recruiting visit." And I remember sitting there going, "God damn, I was so mad. I was so upset that I was missing Eric." And then he goes, "Coach, I'm going to UCLA for my visit." And I went, "Oh, that's cool. Okay, it's UCLA." And but I was still, as a coach, right? You're still upset. Well, the kid ends up going to UCLA. The kid becomes the top linebacker in the country, wins the Buckus Award, gets drafted in the second round of the draft, and he's the starting middle linebacker for the Minnesota Vikings now. And he's on his second $65 million contract, who just got married to a supermodel, and he's living the greatest life he could have ever ever, right? And I'm the idiot that was complaining about him missing a Saturday game at the Clovis Elks tournament. Okay. And that right there, honestly, is my view on multi-sport athletes was changed forever based on him.
Yep.
And if it wasn't for Eric, I don't know how I'd be, because of I know that there's coaches in our area they're not like me in that sense, where and he's helped me a ton. And I'll give credit to Eric, because every time that I have a football player come to me and say, "Coach, you know what, I think I want to quit basketball because I got to focus on football," all I do is I give him Eric's number.
Yep.
And they text Eric or they call Eric, and he's nice enough and he's humble enough in his position to text them back and be like, "Bro, do you like playing basketball?" "Yeah." "What's the last time you're going to have fun playing basketball? So you should probably do it. Because if you're going to play football in college, you're not playing basketball."
Yep.
And vice versa. And it's one of those things where I tell, again, and that's the hardest part about being an athletic director, is how can you get your coaches on the same page as you in that? Because everybody wants to be competitive. Everybody wants to win. Everybody feels like their next job is down the road. And if they don't win this championship, they're not going to get this next job. And I get that. That pressure is real. It's real, and it's more real in other places, believe me. But it's so not the best for the kid. It's just not like that. I have 3 sons, and my 2 older ones right now are playing. My oldest son is my mini me. He knows basketball better than most 13-year-olds. But I have the most joy when he goes and plays football.
Yep.
And he has the most joy, I think, sometimes when he gets to go play another sport.
Yep.
So it's one of those things. I love my kids playing other sports. We've always, my wife and I have always tried to push the boys into doing more than just basketball.
Yeah.
And that's just kind of how I was always, but honest to God, I give so much credit to Eric Kendricks, because if it wasn't for him in that situation, I don't know how I'd be.
Yep.
Honestly.
Yeah. No, and I think the story resonates with me. I just graduated probably one of the best athletes in the history of the school that's going to BYU to play football, and played that exact same 4-sport slate: football, basketball, baseball, and section champion in track in the 100 and 200 2 years in a row, and finished 3rd in the state. And it's like, what else do you need to see? Like, the more they play, the better athletes they become. And so it's, how do you counter message against the youth sports industrial complex? How do you counter message against the club world? We're not going to get into that. That's a battle we're not going to win right now.
$75 billion a year industry. Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. But I think it's great that you have that story. You shared that. Hopefully people can listen to that and understand, truth be told, right? I can't even account for the success you've had, but I know what it is. And it's like, yo, if that's where he's at, like, what are the rest of you doing that are doing this year-round stuff? And how are you really helping your athlete versus helping yourself? And I think, again, keep the student at the center of the equation. And my shift this year, which I think is super funny, is they played the football all-star game in the middle of basketball season. And years ago, it's like, yo, you're not playing in that. Why not?
Yeah.
You might get hurt. And this year it was like, all right, we're not practicing this day. We're going to practice at this time so they can go to practice. And then we're all going to go watch the game. And it's like, to your point, this is for them. And if that's what they want to do, like, how do we support that rather than making it about our agenda?
Because I think you got to keep it on the kid. Like, you have to, again, how many times do we ask the kid what he wants or what she wants? Right. And let's be honest, even take it further. How often can the kids be truthful and tell us what they want or tell their parents what they want?
Right.
Without feeling that pressure, because again, that pressure is starting at such a young age now. Mm-hmm. Right. The pressure to play a sport is starting at second grade, first grade. Mm-hmm. Right. So kids, when they get to about, fifth or sixth, seventh, eighth grade, and their parents have invested in so much in this kind of stuff, the last thing they want to do is disappoint their parents. So they're not going to tell their parent, hey, I really don't like doing this. Right. Because their parents just gone on and spent $100,000 in the last, 3 or 4 years on their kid. The last thing a kid wants to do is disappoint their parents or disappoint their coach. Yeah. But the problem is that what I see is we're not asking the kids what they want.
Right.
We're not giving the kids the confidence to be able to say the right answers or to tell the truth.
Right.
Right. Because again, because the pressure's too much. I mean, heck, I'll tell you, my 10-year-old, or he just turned 11 the other day. Poor guy. This last week, we had to go to Vegas because his older brother played in the last AAU tournament, Bigfoot tournament in Vegas. So they started football, and let's be honest, football season starts like June 1st, pretty much now. So they're both playing, Pee Wee football for our high school programs, middle feeder program. And poor Caleb, my son, who's, he's 11, had to miss 3 days of practice because he had to go for brother's tournament. Mm-hmm. He gets back to practice yesterday, and, he's missed 3 days of practice. And so now he gets in the car after practice and he's in tears. I'm like, what's your problem, man? And he goes, well, I'm not in this position anymore. I'm not doing this anymore. And I'm not doing this anymore. And I'm, what do you mean? He goes, well, because I had to go to Jordan's tournament. It's like, again, you're sitting there going, this kid's 10. I'm like, bro, is this what we're stressing right now? Like, are you getting punished for missing stuff? Like, and at the end of the day, like, we have to look at ourselves as adults and coaches and be like, what are we doing? Like, what are we doing? Right. And how are we, again, it's easy for me to tell my son, well, it's like, son, you missed 3 days. Like, get over it. You'll be fine. You'll get it back. But it doesn't matter to the kid. The kids put in so much work, every kid, right? But are we telling the kids, like, again, it's just, what are we doing as coaches and adults to make it about the kid? It's right. Not about you. It's not about you as a coach. It's right. Not, I tell people all the time, I had my time as a player. Yeah. I got to play in some really cool games, high school wise. I got to play in some amazing games as a junior college player. I got to play in some really cool places as a college player. My time's done. Like, there's nothing about me playing basketball anymore that has anything to do with my job. Right. Right. So it's about the kids. Yep. And if we're not making it about the kids and we're not giving the kids the voice to be confident about what they want, then what are we doing in education? Like, what are we doing coaching wise? And so that's the kind of thing I battle a lot, even with myself. I'm not gonna lie. I mean, every time, right? Because I think a lot of us in this job, we will be lying to ourselves if we're not in it because we're competitive. Yeah. We like to compete, you know? So that's kind of, I don't know.
I love it. And I'll wrap this piece up with this, to your point of how do we highlight the benefits of being multifaceted as a multi-sport athlete, or hell, go be in the theater, right? Doing some things that are going to stretch you, right? And so I've got it to the point where it goes back to, what are your non-negotiables, right? As a parent, right? And in our house, it's, you're playing 3 sports a year and you're going on the 11-day backpacking trip as a sophomore. And outside of that, I don't care what you do. And it's like, those are the non-negotiables. And it doesn't matter. Like, oh, I don't want to play volleyball anymore. Cool. Pick. It's like you're playing something. And the other piece of that, and I think this has been informative for me, it's like, if you decide you want to be a lead at something after your sophomore year, all right, we'll sit down and we'll have a conversation about what that looks like. Yep. And if you want to opt into that program, great. If not, you're still playing through. And it's kind of trickled into our program, right? Because that's like my lens. And that's, I think, enhanced our success as an athletic program, because all of our athletes are trying to wear different hats and trying to figure things out, and they're growing as people. And I think it goes back to roles as well, where, right, Jordan might be the dude on the basketball team, but, you know, doesn't get off the bench on the football team, and he's got to learn how to be a great teammate. And it's like, how do you teach that if you only have one lens? And I think that's the message that I would love for people to take away. And then I'm going to wrap up here with this question, because if that's where you're landing in regards to your children, to your athletes, I want them doing different things. What have you learned? What's the best thing that you've learned and stolen and implemented into your program that did not come from a basketball coach, that came from watching tennis, water polo, football, soccer, theater, where you were like, oh, we're doing that tomorrow?
That's really tough. I've been around so many great coaches. The funny thing about me is, like, I love football. Like, I love football so much. And I didn't used to be like this, but I don't know what it's been. I know it's because maybe it's because of my players. I love high school football games. I love watching college football games. I mean, I don't miss, even though I'm living up here, I don't miss a Fresno State football game. That, growing up, that was your thing to do on a Saturday, right? And I'm such a Fresno homer that, again, I vehemently hated the Raiders my entire life, and then Derek Carr and Devontae on the same team, and now I'm the biggest Raider fan in the world because of those two guys and those two guys only. So I look for football coaches a lot of times, and I've learned, so much. I've worked at schools where the football coach was the center of the campus.
Mm-hmm.
And as the head basketball coach, I firmly believe that your football program and your football coach are right there with the principal. I mean, they're that important for your school. Mm-hmm. I really do believe that. And I have no problem saying that as the basketball coach. I've been blessed that I've worked with, again, some really good coaches at Hoover High School. Coach Plummer was the football coach there forever. And you want to talk about, that was the guy that I went to for everything. He was the one that reached out to me to help me as a young coach. At Clovis West, we had an amazing football program. I talked to Coach Blankenship all the time about certain things. I think that I love football in a sense. We've had good coaches here at Whitney. Mike Jimenez is my mentor, and I work with him every day. He was the football coach that opened up our school. I look at kind of the things and how they do their program when it comes to even like the style of offense. Like, I love spread offense in football because to me, it reminds me of basketball. It reminds me of so many different things. I love I think what I've gained the most respect for, and maybe brought it into my basketball program, is football players have to go through such a grind for one game a week. And basketball has become such a, well, I don't care about that game because I got another one in an hour.
Mm-hmm.
We play so many games in basketball where kids forget, especially the AAU route, right? And youth basketball. I don't even say AAU, it's not AAU anymore. It's youth basketball. We play so many games to where winning and losing really is not it's just kind of whatever, right? I got another one.
Yeah.
Football, you got one game a week.
Yeah.
And you are grinding all summer long in 110 degrees with pads, a helmet, and the brotherhood that gets formed in a football team, I believe, honestly, is just those types of things is what I've kind of looked at and tried to bring towards my basketball program, about just that toughness and making every single moment count, making every single game count. Because you're going to miss it. You're going to, you and I both know this. Like, if you could, you could tell us, like, if you could go back in time, where would you go? What day? And I'd be like, man, my junior year, I was the greatest basketball team I ever played on. And it was the most fun I've ever had playing basketball. Right. And I try to tell these kids this, that, we're going to cherish every moment. We're going to work hard. We're going to grind. And I think it's not really specific, like X's and O's thing that I take from coaches, just more of that.
Yeah.
And just that whole, the mental battle right, that football players have to go through,
Mhm.
right? And just the toughness and just the no fear,
Mhm.
right, that they have to have. It's like, okay, hey, that guy's got the ball. I want you to go ram yourself into that guy going full speed. And oh, by the way, that dude's 6'1", 225 pounds, and he runs like a 4.4. Like, it's like, right. It's I love that part of that. And I got a really great young football coach on this campus right now who played college football, and he's an old linebacker, so they're just built differently, right? And they're awesome. They're just awesome people. And I think more than anything, I've taken a lot of that stuff away, that toughness and the camaraderie and the brotherhood and that whole every minute counts, especially in high school sports, because again, for 90% of our kids, this is going to be what they get.
Yep.
Right. So why not make every minute count? Why not make everything just be as good as it can be?
Yeah.
And to me, that has nothing to do with winning. I think winning is
No.
just a byproduct of that stuff.
Yeah. Well, I'd even push back there and say 97% of our kids, according to the
97.
data,
Yeah, easy. Yeah.
right? So it's like people out there listening that it's like, let me pour everything into this. It's like, yo, you got a 3% chance of that. So like, why not give yourself a few more cards in the deck over here?
Yeah, again, that's the whole other show, right? I know why they're doing that, but it's one of those things. It's just like, yeah. And again, it just goes back to the whole premise of like, what are we doing to give things to our kids, like our students and our athletes? What are we doing to make them be? Because again, you already said there's 97%. The hope is that, 100% of them are good people, first and foremost.
For sure.
Not a-holes, right? How about you not being a-hole?
Yeah.
that would do this world a great service if you just can graduate from high school, learn some great things, love your time here, love your experience, look back on it fondly, and don't be an a-hole when you're older. Love
it. Awesome. That's a great place to stop, Coach. Appreciate having you on. And if we all can take that little bit away as we go through life, don't be an a-hole. The world will be a better place.
Thank you, Coach. I appreciate it.